Welcome back to the Vanessa G Fitcast. I'm Vanessa Pozos, and today I kicked out Omar to bring on a much better looking special guest here, bringing on one of our incredible coaches here at Vital Spark Coaching, Miss Rae Trahan. And I always have to ask her how to pronounce her last name because it's a fancy French last name that I butcher every single time. But Rae is one of our fabulous coaches here. Rae's also a registered dietitian. She joined our team at the beginning of 2024. It's taken a while for me to get a podcast episode recorded because she's just been so incredible and so busy with helping all of our clients through some really incredible transformations and through their journeys. So finally, I have the joy and the pleasure of having her on the podcast for you all so we can learn a little bit more about Rae's really inspiring background and story of how she got to where she is today and where she is at today, because I think there's so much for you all to be able to pull out of her journey, her story, and to just better understand not just why she's such a great coach, but how her clients just love her so much because of everything that she brings to the table. So Rae, welcome to the Vanessa G Fitcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I know we've been looking forward to this for a while now. Well, I know we talked about, like, I just would love for you to be able to share a little bit more of your backstory. I already kind of spoiled that you are a registered dietitian, which is a really impressive credential for those who don't really know what all's involved in becoming a registered dietitian. There's a lot of schooling, a lot of hours and different things involved going into that level of knowledge and credentials. So, I mean, Rae, I would love to maybe even take it all the way back to how you went down the path of dietetics, what your kind of journey was like through, the years of you going through dance and some different things. So, why don't we start there? Talk to us a little bit about your backstory.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I share this a lot with my clients, but for those of you who don't know, I am a past competitive dancer. And so I feel like this is kind of where my health journey kind of all started. When you are an impressionable young preteen going into your teenage years, we, compare our bodies to one another. When you picture the typical ballerina, you picture like this tall, lean, like body type. And I have just never been that. Like, it's just not in my genetics. I am like 5 foot, 5'1" on a really good day. And I'm a little bit curvier. And so in my earlier years, I just didn't understand how this all kind of played a role. But, when you're comparing yourself to these other girls that you're seeing on stage, you kind of go down this path of, I need to do everything I can to like look like that. And so it brought me down like this eating disorder kind of pathway for myself. I had restrictive dieting moments where I just like periods where I wouldn't eat, and then I would end up binging, and then I would end up purging because then I felt like the guilt and the shame of just binge eating. And I did
Mm.
this for a while until it really started to impact like my training and my performance. I just like didn't even have the energy to complete a routine. I was like panting out of breath. I would like break out in cold sweats. Like my body was just like was not responding to it well. And luckily I had like the realization of like, okay, this is just like not sustainable for me with the amount of like work that I'm putting in the studio. Um, and so I really started messing around with like different types of like nutrition. And I always say like my inspiration for nutrition came from like health class. Like that's just like a very like cliche thing to say. Like I had a really really great health teacher in high school who just like really inspired me and really taught me a lot about like nutrition and how to better like fuel myself and things like that. She was also I was a cheerleader in high school, so she was my cheer coach as well. So we were like really close, and we used to like talk about all that kind of stuff. But I just like really was kind of like self-taught at the beginning. I was always really big into like health at that point, and then fitness. She kind of inspired like my fitness journey as well. And so I actually went to college for nursing at first because I wanted to be in the health field and I wanted to like help people in that realm. But once I got to clinicals, I realized nursing was not for me because I do not like touching people. Much as I thought like that was like the number one deterring factor. Like, no, this is not for me. I do not want to touch these people. And I didn't even know dietetics was a thing at first. And it was actually an elective course that I had to take in nursing. So when I took that class, I was like, this is more my speed. This feels more aligned with what I want to do. And so I switched my major, and then that was kind of
The
it
rest
from
was history.
yeah.
It's funny. I know you had told me that before of how you were originally considering nursing, and then you thought about the fact of like having to actually touch people and like using
Yeah.
different things. And I was like, I can absolutely resonate with that in terms of I think similarly, we're the types of people where we just love to help people. We love health and we love helping people. But when we think about, a career path such as nursing, of now we're, actually using needles and things and touching bodies like that may not always feel the best for us. I can absolutely resonate with that. So all the respect in the world to our nurses out there for what you do.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But Ray, I find it super interesting when I think about something that makes Vital Spark so unique, I think, across any other coaching company, is the way that we kind of bridge the gaps between, dealing with advanced hormone and gut dysfunction and the functional health side of that, bridged with mindset and relationship with food. And I don't think that there's any other company that does it the way that we do. And I think that's something that's very unique, is when I think about almost, I mean, not even almost, every single one of our coaches has a background or some journey that we've been through regarding our relationship with food, having struggled with, binge eating and, for you, binging and purging and a lot of these different things, where I know for a fact that this is one of the many reasons why our coaching staff is so incredible with what we do, because we aren't just, telling people what to eat, how to eat. Like, we really are taking into account the very sensitiveness of relationship with food dynamics. So I am kind of curious a little bit of, as you went through your own journey coming from dance, where there's a lot of disordered eating is very common in that type of sport as well, with kind of the pressures that are put upon you within your body and the way you feel and see about your body. I am maybe kind of curious here of like, how do you think that your background and like your journey of going through those things has affected you ultimately becoming a coach, you ultimately wanting to help people with these things, or even just like how you help people with these things?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. Honestly, um, I think it just comes down from like that personal experience and just knowing that binging and restricting is something that I still work through on a day-to-day basis. As I got more into the functional health side of things, like I was almost, I'm going to use the word fear mongered because I feel like it's a very hot phrase in the social media realm. But I was almost fear mongered into, not eating gluten, not eating dairy, cutting out all kinds of sugars. And like, I took this approach of just like clean eating only. And I feel, in a sense, at that time, I thought I was like, oh, I'm doing all the right things for my body. But then I would fall into a binge episode of I eat all the cakes and the cookies, and it would just feel really, really bad about myself of like, well, I do so well like throughout like the week, but like now I go out to eat with a friend or like with my fiance, and I just feel like I can't control myself, and I feel like I use that example a lot with my clients of like, I feel like binging is always something that's going to kind of take place in your life, just in different dynamics. Because I feel like that addiction has also led me to like a caffeine addiction, you know, really struggling with like adrenal fatigue too. And so it just really is navigating it through different avenues of my life. And I feel like the awareness is what I teach a lot of my clients, is just, you have to find it, right? Like it's going to pop up, like that addictive behavior is going to pop up in a lot of areas of your life, but building the awareness around it and being able to like see it whenever it does pop up can really help you like navigate it further, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes total sense, because ultimately, we could just give somebody a protocol to follow. But if it's something to where it doesn't take into account, how they're actually going to be navigating food for the rest of their life. And we're not actually helping them through what happens after this protocol. How do we kind of like resume a normal life of eating, the cakes and the cookies and things like you said, without it suddenly becoming this trigger because now we're afraid of those things. I mean,
Mhm.
I think you do a really fabulous job of helping clients through those types of situations. Something I haven't really quite mentioned yet for our listeners as well. Rae is a really incredible hormone and gut expert as well. She has a lot of background in functional health training. As we brought her on our team, she already had a few years of experience in online coaching, really working specifically with very functional cases. So, very functional health, meaning working through specific systems of the body, helping everything from putting autoimmune diseases into remission to helping women conceive naturally to really, really powerful health journeys. Rae, I know a lot of that comes from your own passion for having worked through some of these things on your own. Maybe let's go back to your own story a little bit of when did you first start noticing that, like, okay, something doesn't quite feel right here in my body, and what led you to maybe go down that path of exploring functional health a little bit further?
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to, college days, and I'm sure every college student listening out there can really relate to this. College is rough, especially when you have like a part-time job on top of that. So I trained as a competitive dancer my entire life. Whenever I graduated high school, the studio owner kind of like hired us on as assistant teachers. And so I was working at the studio. So I would go to classes from 7:30 a.m. to 3:30, and then classes started at 4:30, and I would teach all the way till 9:30. So throughout the day, you don't really have time to like do homework and study and projects and essays. And so it was when I was getting off of the studio at 9:30, that's when I had to complete all of my schoolwork. So I was staying up until 2, 3 a.m. I lived an hour and a half away from my college. So I'd have to get up at like 5. So I was only getting about 2 to 3 hours of sleep for a solid 4 years, 5 years of my life. So this is kind of like what brought on like the caffeine addiction, right? Like remember this so vividly. I would like wake up in the morning and fix a cup of coffee. And I would drink that while I was getting ready for class, like getting ready for school. And then I would fix another cup for like the drive there because it was an hour and a half long. And then I would do my morning classes. On my lunch break, I would go to like Starbucks or like CC's or something and get another coffee to finish out my afternoon classes. And then on the drive home from college to the studio, I would crack open an energy drink. The Bang energy drinks were like my vice for so long. Oh my gosh, I used to pound those back like that was water. And so it was just like the mix of like overstimulating with caffeine, no sleep, late nights, early mornings. I was honestly at this time, I don't think I've talked to like one client about this before. I was like in a really, really toxic relationship at the time. And so not only was I struggling like physically, I was really struggling like emotionally and mentally. It actually led to a failed engagement at that time. But then the cherry on top of it all was COVID hit. And so honestly, I just fell into like this big dark hole of just like anxiety. I was having panic attacks nonstop. I was so like super depressed, like couldn't get out of bed at the time. And I was learning a lot about like nutrition in school, studying to be a dietitian. But at the time I was like, I can't figure out like what's going on with me, honestly. Like I just feel like I'm in this slump. I don't feel good. I don't feel like myself. Like something is happening, right? And like any like sane person would do, you go to Dr. Google, right? And they can tell you everything that's wrong with you. And at that time, it's like 2020, so TikTok is huge. And so I'm scrolling on TikTok one day and this girl pops up on my feed and she's like, "Oh, birth control this, birth control that, birth control this." And she starts listing out all of these symptoms that she's struggling with since, being on birth control. And I was like, huh, that sounds awfully a lot like me. So what do? I just toss the entire pack of birth control into the trash, never took it again. Right. Well, this was like something that I thought was like really going to benefit my body. I'm like, oh, I dumped those chemicals. Like, who needs those? Like, I'm going to feel so much better. And I did for a while. Like, I felt great until, you know, I didn't. I then I started experiencing a lot of like bloating. I would eat and look 4 or 5 months pregnant. I was super constipated. I wouldn't have a bowel movement for a week. I remember waking my mom up one night in like severe pain. I was like, Mom, I think my appendix just like exploded. Honestly, it's like, we need to go to the emergency room. And so she took me to the emergency room, and the ER doctor was like, there's nothing wrong. Like, your appendix is fine. Like, when was the last time you went to the bathroom? I was like, well, I just peed earlier. Like, what are you talking about? He's like, no, when's the last time you had a bowel movement? And I had to think about it. Like, it wasn't something I was like, oh yeah, like today, like, or yesterday. Like, I had to think. I was like, well, I didn't go today, and I know I didn't go yesterday or the day before that. It turns out it had been like a week since I had gone to the bathroom. Like, insane. I had acne from like the top of my forehead all the way down my cheeks, all the way down my neck, like to my collarbone. It was just like covered in it. My chest, my shoulders, my back, covered in acne. I had no energy. I was gaining weight rapidly, could not figure it out what was happening. And I just kind of like accepted it at this time. We were in the pandemic. I wasn't leaving my house anyway. So like, what the hell did it matter? I was just like, fine. But it was at this time that I met my now fiance, Connor. He got me into like the CrossFit realm of things, right? He's a CrossFit trainer, actually. So we started doing CrossFit classes together. And this was the leanest I had ever been at this time, right? Going to CrossFit every single day, got back on my nutrition. Everything was like peachy clean. But I think this is like a really important lesson to learn as well, is like, I looked so good. I look back at pictures of myself at that time and I'm like, damn, like, I looked really, really good. But I felt the worst I had ever felt. Like, I was still bloating. I still had acne, like no energy, pounding back caffeine still. Like, I just felt not like in my body. It just did not feel right. I would go to doctor after doctor after doctor after dermatologist, and they would just prescribe, antibiotics or get back on birth control. And like, I'm not doing that. This is the entire reason of why I'm struggling with what I'm struggling with. This is actually where I found like my first functional health doctor, after, going back to Dr. Rule. I really decided to like take more like holistic approach to things. So I found my own. There's a functional practitioner locally where we live. And I went to see him. He helped me so much. I was like feeling better. My face was clearing up. My bloating was going away. But I feel like he didn't teach me anything. Like, I wasn't learning why these things were happening and why I was feeling better. I just knew that, hey, like, I'm feeling better. This is great. So this is where I started following just like a bunch of functional health practitioners, health coaches, and everything on social media, like on Instagram, and learning more. This is actually where I found Vince Pitstick, our mentor. I found Metabolic Mentor University, and I just felt so drawn to it. I was like, this is just what I need, right? This is going to teach me how to essentially heal myself. And I selfishly did it for myself. I had no intention of being like a health coach or anything of the sort. I was like, I just want to be my own advocate. Like, I'm tired of doctors turning me away. I'm tired of people telling me that there's nothing wrong with me when I know that this is not how I'm supposed to feel. Like, at the time I was like 23 years old. I was like, I'm 23 and I feel like I'm 50. Like, my bones hurt, my muscles ache. Like, I just feel horrible. There is something wrong, and if any of you follow Vince Pitstick on Instagram, he can convince you that like the sky is purple. Like, he can just convince you of
We've had him
any.
on the podcast in the past, so if anybody's listened to that episode, they know he's a very, very captivating speaker and really powerful, really a leader in the functional health space, which is has been incredible, and why he really helps mentor us as well, is because of so much he's done for this space, the protocols he's really
Mhm.
created that we've been able to use and adapt even to some of our sustainable practices as well. So not to cut you off there, Ray, but
No, you're good.
want to make sure the listeners know who we're talking about here. If you've caught that episode, you'll remember, like, yes, that makes sense what Ray's saying.
Yes, exactly. He just has a way of speaking that draws you in, and you're like, yeah, like that's what I need. And so I invested in his university just to like learn everything. And as I was going through all of the modules, I was my own personal guinea pig. Like, all of the protocols. I would do them on myself. And I felt really, really great. Like I was in this place of just like, I'm finally healed. Like my gut health is in check. My hormones are in check. I had ran Dutch tests and GI maps and like all of myself. I was like, took great pride in doing it all on my own. I was like, I got this, right? But, then I started health coaching. I was like, if I can do this for myself, I can do this for other people. So I started helping other women just like myself who were struggling with that. And then as I got more advanced as a coach, I started taking on more elaborate cases like infertility and autoimmune diseases and things like that. But then slowly I started to realize the more work I put into like my career and like helping other people, I was slowly starting to slip back into like old patterns, right? I found myself almost like relapsing. My SIBO came back, my acne came back, my adrenal fatigue was just as prominent as it was from day one. And I know like we've talked about this very recently, like I'm going through all of the same things that I was going through in the past. And I think just for anyone out there like listening, it's like once you've done all of the work on yourself, it's like there's a maintenance phase that has to be kind of implemented, or else things will just kind of go back to normal. And I feel like we do a really good job here at Vital Spark of like teaching our clients that exit strategy that they need to continue on once they're not with us anymore. And that's what I didn't have. It was like, oh, I'm healed, I'm good to go. And then just stopped. So,
Yeah.
but I finally hired my own coach, to really help me get things back on track for myself. And like, that's kind of where we are today.
Yeah, your story really is so powerful. I mean, it's wild when I think about, how many parallels there are between your journey and my journey from, both of us struggling with our relationship with food early on and, our battles even through some of that leading to some of our kind of passion for nutrition and health and wanting to help people through some of these things as well. But, through a lot of our kind of almost path of being very driven, being very hardworking, being a little bit more on that maybe type A type personality, we tend to be this exact type of people that can also maybe run our adrenals into the ground a little bit. You and I both also came off of birth control, not in the best ways, not doing it, correctly, essentially, and finding ourselves with our hormones a little bit screwed up. But, all of this to say, I really do believe that the battles that you go through as a human being in your own health journey, that's what can really make you an incredible coach. Because as you're working with clients every step of the way, when you say like, I understand what you're going through, and like when they're sharing with you their issues of, how they feel so unconfident in their body because they've only been, on this path until they came to us. They've just been like gaining weight despite doing everything right. And, their acne has only gotten worse and they're feeling really self-conscious and they have no energy. They don't feel like themselves anymore. They don't feel at all like the person that they once were. It's like we can look them in the face and say, like, I understand. I get it. I've been there. And I really think that that's, one of the many things that just brings the magic in you as a coach, Rae. Something that you were even just saying there as well is that you're still in it now. You've kind of found yourself after kind of putting everything into a great spot and having it in a great spot for a good period of time through your process of coaching. You kind of found yourself a little bit more starting to fall back into some old patterns. And so practicing what you preach, you're realizing like, oh my gosh, I need to be better about, maintaining things that I'm doing. And we talk about this a lot with clients where this is why the way that we do things at Vital Spark is different from every other company. Because again, like I think any functional health doctor or, especially like, functional health specific coaches, you can give a protocol, you can give supplements, you can give like a process to heal the body and get it into a good spot, put the autoimmune disease into remission, get hormones back in balance, clear up the gut dysfunction, like whatever it is going on. However, is it going to actually benefit you if you can't maintain that long term? And that's something I think that we do really wonderfully. And I think you are just a perfect example of practicing what you preach with that, because it is hard, it is challenging, and we do have to figure out how to manage that, even knowing our own personalities, our own lifestyles, where it's very easy for us to like put ourselves aside and focus on other people first. And I know that you're the type of person that you do tend to put others first before yourself, and that can easily become your downfall as well. Um, I guess I'm kind of curious a little bit from you, Rae. I mean, you have, in my opinion, I feel like you've almost like lived many lives already, only being, in your late 20s now. And it's like going through kind of these just journeys year over year of crossing from like leaving dance and having a little bit of like some body image issues, some relationship with food issues, and then going into dietetics and into school and all that, and then starting to get into functional health and going through your own journey with your own body, and then starting to coach and really help women with these things, and now coming to Vital Spark. I guess I'm curious, what do you feel like have been like the biggest lessons for you overall from your journey that you would want your clients to take from what you've been through?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. Um, I would say that the way self love is really, really huge for me. Because if I would have just learned, the tools and everything to really, truly love myself really early on in this process, I feel like I wouldn't have like struggled as much as I have. Like it's a daily practice that I do now, but I wish it's something that I would have implemented years ago. And I actually have it like tattooed on my body now, like love yourself first. Because, like you just said, like we have this way of just like always putting others before ourselves. And well, that's a great trait to have. People around you probably love you for it. It can really drive you into the dirt, right? Your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health, when you're making all of these other things a priority, but not yourself. And so I think it's just a really important lesson to learn, to have the maintenance that you need for your own body is to put yourself as a priority. Sometimes even like with families and careers, like that's always going to be there, right? But it's really hard to show up for those things and show up as your best self if you're not putting in the work into every aspect of yourself, not just your physical, but also your mental and your emotional and spiritual as well, if you're a spiritual person.
Absolutely. If I can even put you on the spot a little bit too, Rae, if you don't mind, and I hope you don't mind because I'm going to do it anyway. But I know even like at the retreat we had, what was that, 1 or 2 months ago or so, and we were talking a little bit, and you were a little bit vulnerable with kind of our team sharing a little bit about your backstory of. Like you had mentioned earlier, you did have a past relationship where you were engaged and you had to choose to break off that engagement because it was a toxic relationship. And you had shared how this was really really challenging of kind of the community that you live in, of growing up in the deep south. Like it's a little bit abnormal to not be married with kids at your age. And there were times where you had to kind of like look around and feel like, and I'm the black sheep here, I'm kind of stepping away, but like that was so necessary and vital for you to, as you're saying, love yourself first, put yourself first. And because of the hard decisions you had to make, you now are where you are now in a beautiful relationship, getting married next year, and with a adorable new little puppy. And it sounds like living a much better version and more authentic version of yourself. I At least that's my interpretation of things. But I mean, is that how you feel about that as well, Rae?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really all about the journey, right? Even when you don't feel like something has been successful, there's always a lesson to be learned from that experience. And that's the biggest thing that I took away from that relationship. And the biggest thing that I took away from that just period in my life in general was like, I felt like I was in this rut, in this slump that I was never going to get out of. I physically felt stuck. And even though like that relationship just wasn't successful, no matter how we both tried to make it work, it just we just both felt like stuck. It more so felt something like we had to do than like wanted to do, if that makes sense. Again, like you said, because we are from the deep south, and if you reach 25 and you're not married with 3 kids, you're like shunned. I'm just kidding, but no. Um, but yeah, it's really just when things aren't successful for you the first go round, it's just because there's a deeper lesson to learn about yourself in that moment. And I feel like that's the biggest thing that I took away from that period is just I learned so much about myself moving forward into where I am in my life. Things that needed to change and habits that needed to change, things that needed to change within myself to grow and be a better person. You can't grow if you're stuck. So it was just really adapting to that whole experience, really.
Absolutely. Well, Rae, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing more about your journey and your story. And I can imagine even for, your current clients, your future clients, and anybody else out there who is maybe even just hearing who you are for the first time and kind of learning about your journey. I think hearing your experience and to be able to look and hear somebody like you who might be where they strive to be, to be in a place where, they have clear skin and they're in a much better spot. And yes, you are still working through issues because we all are constantly a work in progress. We all are constantly still working through our own journeys, but they can see themselves in you and they can actually see how you've worked through so much of of what you have worked through. And that gives them inspiration. So thank you again for sharing everything that you've shared here. Where can our listeners connect with you if they want to, reach out or just, follow along and kind of learn more about you or, connect with you further?
Yeah, so you guys can follow me on Instagram. My user handle is RAE dot RD on Instagram. You can follow me on TikTok too, but I don't really post on there.
I'm like, I have a TikTok, but I don't actually even really know how to use it if I'm being honest.
Purely for entertainment purposes.
Well, thank you, Rae, for just taking some time to, share your journey with us. Thank you, everybody, for listening. If you have not already, definitely go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss another episode. If you resonate with this, I really encourage you to reach out to Rae, connect with her. She's an open book and she's really, really incredible to talk to. So I would encourage you to do so. But thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week with another great episode.
Bye, guys.